A brand new study just made headlines across the country. It claims that a small amount of wine may actually improve certain health outcomes, but beer and hard liquor do not. Now, if you're someone who has been trying to make sense of your relationship with alcohol, that kind of headline can feel like permission. I know because when a similar article appeared in 1992 that daily consumption of wine improved cardiovascular health, I justified my drinking for another half dozen years based on that alone. So, this latest article, I'm sure, has the potential for similar effects. Or, at the very least, can create confusion. So today, I want to look more closely at the science, because people justify their drinking by claiming that it improves a host of perceived benefits. But is it really rational to say drinking to improve health is one of them? Welcome to Second Act Recovery. I'm Dr. Donald Crowe. I practiced medicine for over 40 years, and now I've been sober for nearly 3 decades. And what I want to do today is not to argue with this recent study, but to place it in context. Because the real question is not, is wine better than beer? The real question is, how much alcohol is actually safe for you? Let's start with what this new study actually showed. Here's the version I heard reported on the evening news. Researchers followed over 300,000 individuals for more than a decade, and what they found was this. People who drank small amounts of wine had a lower risk of cardiovascular death compared to those who didn't drink and compared to those who drank beer or liquor. On the surface, that sounds compelling. But here's the part that matters. This was not a randomized controlled trial. No one was assigned to drink wine. No one was told to avoid beer. This was an observational study, which means it tells us what people who already behave in a certain way tend to experience, not what causes those outcomes. And that distinction is everything. Because when you look more closely at who drinks wine, you begin to see a very different story. Wine drinkers, on average, tend to have higher income levels. They tend to eat more balanced diets. They tend to drink with meals rather than in binges. They exercise more and they smoke less. In other words, they tend to live differently. So now we have to ask the obvious question. Is it the wine or is it the life surrounding the wine? Because those are not the same thing. And this is where things can get uncomfortable, because it challenges a very attractive idea, the idea that we can isolate alcohol and extract a benefit from it. But when we zoom out and look at the broader scientific literature, the picture becomes more consistent. There is no clear threshold below which alcohol is completely risk-free. Let me say that again. There is no amount of alcohol that has been proven to be universally safe. Now, that doesn't mean every drink is harmful in a dramatic or immediate way. But it does mean that even small amounts carry trade-offs. And those trade-offs are often invisible until they're not. For example, even low levels of alcohol consumption have been associated with an increased risk of certain cancers. Not dramatically and not immediately, but measurably. Alcohol affects estrogen pathways. It influences DNA repair. It alters cellular signaling. And over years, those small effects accumulate. At the same time, alcohol has short-term effects that many people interpret as beneficial. Reduced anxiety, an illusion of ease, a softening of the mind's threat detection system. And this is where I want to introduce something important. Because what many people experience as a benefit is often not the creation of something positive. It is the suppression of something uncomfortable. Alcohol does not necessarily make you feel better. It often makes you feel less anxious, less tense, less aware. And for a time, that feels like relief. But from a physiologic standpoint, that is not the same as improvement. It is modulation, temporary modulation. And the brain adapts. Over time, it recalibrates around that suppression, which is why what once required one drink eventually requires two, then three. Not because you're weak, but because your system has adjusted. Now, let's return to the question of safety. Public health organizations have tried to define low-risk drinking. Typically, that means something like 1 drink per day for women, 2 for men. But even those guidelines are shifting because the newer data suggests that the safest amount of alcohol consumption may in fact be 0. Now, that statement often gets pushback, and it should, because we have to be precise. There are people who can consume small amounts of alcohol and never escalate. There are people who can have a glass of wine with dinner and leave it at that. But there are also many people, like myself, who cannot. And the difficulty is you don't always know which group you're in until time has already passed. So when someone asks how much alcohol is safe, the honest answer is not a number. It's a framework. From a strictly biological standpoint, less is better. From a behavioral standpoint, patterns matter more than quantities. And from a personal standpoint, your history matters most of all. Because if alcohol has ever begun to take more than it gives, then the question changes. It's no longer about safety, it's about compatibility. Is alcohol compatible with the life you're trying to build? That is a very different question. And in my experience, both as a physician and as someone who has lived this, that question is far more predictive than any guideline. Because people rarely struggle with alcohol at the level of one isolated drink. They struggle with patterns and with escalation, with the gradual narrowing of options. And that process does not announce itself early. It is subtle. It looks like normal behavior until it isn't. So when you hear a headline that says wine may be good for your heart, I want you to hear it differently. Not as permission, not as a green light, but as one piece of a much larger and more complicated picture. Because the same body of evidence tells us that alcohol increases cancer risk. Alcohol disrupts sleep architecture. Alcohol alters mood regulation over time. Alcohol can impair metabolic health, even in moderate amounts. So now we're no longer talking about simple benefit. We're talking about trade-offs. And the question becomes, are those trade-offs worth it for you? For some people, the answer may be yes. For others, the answer becomes clear only after years of trying to make it work. And if you are someone who has found yourself repeatedly asking, why can't I just drink normally? Or why does this keep becoming a problem? Then I would suggest something. You may be asking the wrong question, because the goal is not to prove that alcohol can be used safely. The goal is to determine whether it belongs in your life at all. And before you go, if you're serious about taking control of your relationship with alcohol, I've put together a couple of free resources for you. One is the CCBBAA checklist. This, along with a pre-recovery blueprint, can help you get clear on exactly where you are and what needs to change before you even take that first step. And if you're ready to go further, I've also created a 90-day sobriety survival kit. You'll find links to all of these in the description below. They're there to give you clarity, structure, and a starting point, because this process doesn't have to be guesswork. Finally, please subscribe to the channel, like, share, and comment, as these help us grow. And check out this video where I offer advice about what to say to someone who asks you if you want a drink after you've quit. I'm Dr. Donald Crowe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.